Okay, so Montenegro has just received the green light for starting accession negotiations, which took some time. How do you perceive this news? What is this going to do with Montenegro?
I think this is a fantastic news for Montenegro because it's an encouragement for everything which has been done so far, but it's also a strong message to the government that EU will be following up with the further reforms in a more strict and more patient manner, which is important also for those within the government who were actually reluctant to undertake the reform process but were quite good in rhetorics. And on the other hand, I think it's very important for the region because it sends a message that the enlargement process is still going on, even though there have been a lot of the dilemmas and skepticism about this.
Do you have the feeling that in Montenegro people realize how high the stakes are for Montenegro because we had some issues in the European Union, some not very good examples. Now Croatia is a good example for being prepared. Do you think that Montenegro really realizes how much work it needs to do?
I'm pretty much sure that neither the government nor the ordinary citizens are aware of the complexity of this process, regardless the fact that the government would point out that it is requesting process and that it will actually bring a lot of the change. The level of the information, which is important for the everyday life of citizens, is in an extremely low level, and I think that there is a lot of the work to be done there.
Who should do this work?
I think that this work should be done by all the stakeholders who have already had developed programs within the European affairs. That does not refer only to the NGOs who did the most of this work, but also more active roles should be taken by the local authorities, media especially who are not specializing within the EU affairs, and the government who is sitting far too much in the offices and speaking really little with citizens.
Which area in society do you think that needs most urgent attention and reforms?
It's very difficult to give this to give the precise reply concerning this. But if we take the fact that one of the biggest burden that the society is suffering from is corruption, I believe that the reform of the judiciary is the utmost priority because without that strong pillar, we cannot actually proceed with the other reforms.
What we have as an experience with Bulgaria and I think to some extent Romania too is that when the reforms process starts, the system itself, especially the judiciary, starts resisting. Do you think that there's a realization that things should be done in a different way? The Commission is already changing approach. It starts the negotiations with Montenegro for the first time from these particular chapters that deal with judiciary, fundamental rights, and things like that. But still, do you think that there's a realization that this is the area that is most difficult to reform?
The fact that it is most difficult doesn't mean that it should be left until the end. I think that the approach to face with that at the very beginning is very useful for Montenegrin society because otherwise we could have end up in circling with the other reforms which would not have the support within this part. Nobody has said from the European Commission that all of the tasks from the chapter 23 and consequently chapter 24 should be done in a year or two. In fact, we got the message that these are the chapters that we will actually open and close the negotiations. So there is enough of the time, but this is also a test for the actual political willingness to start the effective reform process, which has not been seen so far.
Your NGO is doing quite a lot of work, as far as I can see, on civil education, European integration, things like that. You said that it's the level of knowledge is really low, but is there something particular that you meet when doing your job, like resistance or skepticism or vice versa, hope?
Talking with our citizens, we have been doing during the this year and last year a huge project within the 9 Montenegro municipalities, visiting different municipalities, talking to people, conducting the public opinion research and focus groups. We have discovered that Montenegro is not speaking with one voice. The opinion that has the citizens of Pljevlja does not to have to correspond with anything with the opinion of a citizen of Herceg Novi. There are different kind of concerns and questions, and the support for the EU integration process is varying enormously, starting from the almost like 83 or 84% and going below 50% in some of the municipalities. Also, the questions that the citizens have and that they are posing are quite different. This is at the end sending a strong message to all of us which are eager to have the process going on more smooth and quality manner. Citizens are having, in a very broad manner, two views on European integration. One is due to the fact that we are living quite difficult and that the economic crisis is having its very negative results. European Union is seen as something which will, as a magic, change that overnight to bring the huge salaries, welfare state, and more quality education and so on. On the other hand, there are citizens who are reluctant to change their habits. They want to continue to prepare their rakia or wine in the exactly same manner as they did. They see everything which comes in the process of aligning with standards of the EU as the unnecessary complication which is not bringing any benefits to them, and they are showing quite high degree of skepticism. In both of the cases, the common point is that they lack genuine information on the EU and what the process is actually bringing to Montenegro. And in both of the cases, it could bring a lot of the disappointment and burden to the further process.
Well, I was here these few days, and I was speaking to various stakeholders, and it seemed to me that all the expectations are about the reforms that the European integration is going to impose. But in the same time, I wonder, and I ask everyone I speak to this question, is there a risk, because of what's happening in the European Union now, for some kind of skepticism, for some kind of reforms stalling because of what is happening in the European Union, because of the lack of knowledge, what kind of a European Union Montenegro is going to join sometime in the future?
The Euroscepticism is already living in Montenegro. It's not articulated through any of the important social subjects, starting from the political parties or NGOs or media or other public figures, but within the citizens it is living. And in one way it is the echo of what they have heard on turbulences within the EU, but in most of that opinion it is actually the fear that they will lose more than they will get.
Okay.
And I honestly believe that Montenegro is only getting with the process of approximation with the EU standards, but also we need to start urgently to work on this within the country, because otherwise the legitimacy of the process will be questioned.
So you think that maybe some kind of an alternative should be thought about or deliberated? What should we do if something happens to the European Union? Is that what you're saying?
I think that within the public discourse, the main message that all of us should send, and when I said all of us, I'm talking about all of those who are really focusing on European affairs and wishing to have Montenegro more developed and being a member in the real sense, should be that this process is nothing else than democratization of the country. So it's regardless the fact whether we will be actually the member of the EU or not, the country will be better off. we will be more developed in every sense, will be safer society, we will be society of equal chances as we are not now, and in that regard we can behave as Switzerland or some of the other countries, or Norway, which can actually say no to EU.
You mentioned shortly, but can you please elaborate a little bit more? In what way does the European Union exist in the rhetoric of political parties? In what way do they talk about the European Union? Do they talk about it at all?
First of all, I think it's important to say that unfortunately within the political parties there is no real lifelong learning system, which also reflects to the knowledge on the EU. It's very superficial. They're learning from the newspapers and magazines, and that reflects also to the messages that they're sending. These messages are populistic. They are mainly referring to the dates that we will get this or this, but not explaining both to their voting body or other citizens and stakeholders what will be the real changes within the process. And unfortunately, I'm not an optimist that that's going to change because of the format of the political leaders. We can only hope that we will have some new generations within the political parties who will actually send other messages.
I know that this is most people do not like this question because it's kind of hypothetical. But in your views, when you think about it, when you know what Montenegro is and what is the starting point, when do you think it is realistic that the country will be ready to join the European Union? In a perfect world, of course, if everything is just like it is with the EU itself.
There is one huge advantage of Montenegro. It is a small system, and it is in one way very difficult for the small system to undertake all of these obligations that even the big systems are doing. But it's easier to control it and to influence these changes. So I would say if there is undoubtable political will to really engage within the process of European integration, we will not have any problems, and that could be really, really fast. But even in the case where there is a lack of this political will, due to the fact that the process has started, that you cannot stop it, I think it's going to happen in the coming financial perspective of the EU, probably by the end of this.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
For your time.